Listen carefully. Elon Musk sent me an offer after we banned Starlink in Burkina Faso. He thought I would beg him to return, or we needed him more than he needed us. When I looked at his offer and sent back with one sentence that left him speechless, "Keep your Starlink. We will build our own internet." Today, I will explain why I said no to the richest man in the world and why that decision protects our future. When we banned Starlink a few days ago, the world called us foolish. They said, "You are cutting yourself off from progress. You need modern technology. And you cannot survive without Western innovation." Wrong. What they did not understand is this: we did not ban Starlink because we hate technology, we banned it because we understand power. And I mean real power, not the power that comes from weapons or money, but the power that comes from controlling the infrastructure that connects people, that transmits information, that shapes how nations communicate with each other and with the world. Let me be very clear about something before I continue. This decision was not made in anger. It was not made impulsively. It was not made because we want to isolate ourselves from the modern world. This decision was made after months of careful study, after consulting with our best engineers, after analyzing exactly what Starlink's presence in Burkina Faso would mean for our sovereignty, our security, and our future. We looked at what happened in other African nations that welcomed Starlink with open arms. We studied the contracts they signed. We examined the terms they accepted. We investigated the consequences they now face. And what we found alarmed us deeply. In country after country, we saw the same pattern: initial excitement about bringing internet to remote areas, followed by growing dependence on a system they could not control, followed by the slow realization that they had given a foreign corporation access to their most sensitive communications. We saw nations that could no longer make independent decisions about their digital infrastructure because Starlink had become too deeply embedded in their systems to remove without causing massive disruption. We saw governments that discovered too late that the free or discounted internet they had accepted came with hidden costs, costs measured not in money, but in sovereignty, in privacy, in the ability to control their own digital future. That is why we banned Starlink before it could establish that same stranglehold here. The international reaction was immediate and predictable. Western media outlets, the same outlets that never report on our achievements, only our struggles, suddenly became very interested in Burkina Faso. They ran headlines calling our decision backwards, isolationist, anti-progress. Technology commentators who had never visited Africa, who knew nothing about our needs or our capabilities, wrote opinion pieces explaining why we were making a terrible mistake. Even some African leaders who had already signed deals with Starlink, leaders who perhaps did not want to admit they might have made a different choice, publicly questioned our decision. But I noticed something interesting about all this criticism. None of it addressed the fundamental question: should any nation allow a foreign corporation to control its digital communications infrastructure? Instead, they focused on convenience, on speed, on how long it would take us to build our own alternative. They talked about everything except sovereignty. That told me we had made the right decision. Because when your critics avoid discussing the principle behind your choice, it usually means they know you are right about the principle, they just want you to ignore it for the sake of convenience. Let me tell you what happened behind closed doors after the ban was announced. After the ban, Elon Musk's team contacted my office within 48 hours. Not Musk himself, of course. Billionaires do not make first contact. They send representatives, lawyers, negotiators who speak in careful language and present offers designed to sound irresistible. They offered us a deal: Starlink internet for government buildings, free for 1 year. They called it humanitarian support for digital development. The presentation was impressive. They showed us statistics about how Starlink had brought internet to remote areas in other countries. They showed us testimonials from satisfied customers. They showed us projections of how quickly we could connect our most isolated communities. It sounded generous. It looked like help. My advisors were divided. Some saw an opportunity to bring immediate connectivity to areas that desperately needed it. Others were suspicious of any offer that seemed too good to be true. I told them I would review the contract personally before making any decision. That night I sat in my office and read every word of the agreement they had sent. Not just the main document, the entire package, including all the appendices, all the technical specifications, all the fine print that most people never bother to read. And that is where I found the truth hidden beneath the generous offer. Clause 7. All data passing through Starlink satellites can be accessed by the parent company for security purposes. I read that clause 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. They were saying explicitly that every email sent by our government officials, every document transmitted between our ministries, every communication between our military commanders, all of it could be accessed by Musk's company. For security purposes. Whose security? Not ours. Theirs. They wanted the legal right to read our government's communications whenever they deemed it necessary for their security. I kept reading. Clause 12. The service can be terminated at any time without explanation. Without explanation, without notice, without appeal. Imagine building your government's digital infrastructure on a foundation that could be pulled out from under you at any moment, for any reason, with no recourse. Imagine being in the middle of a crisis, a natural disaster, a security threat, a public health emergency, and suddenly your communications go dark because a corporation on another continent decided to flip a switch. That is not infrastructure. That is a leash. I kept reading. Clause 18. Disputes will be settled in American courts under American law. This was perhaps the most revealing clause of all. They were saying that if we had any disagreement with them about service, about pricing, about data access, about anything, we would have to travel to America, hire American lawyers, argue our case in American courts, under American legal standards. We would be judged by a system designed to protect American corporate interests, not African national sovereignty. This was not a partnership. This was surveillance dressed as charity. They wanted to give us internet we did not control, through satellites we could not access, under terms we could not challenge. The next morning, I called my team together, my top advisors, my technology experts, my security chiefs, my economic planners. I showed them the clauses I had found. I watched their faces as they read the fine print they had missed in the initial presentation. Then I asked one question: if they can turn it off whenever they want, if they can read all our communications, if we have no legal recourse when disputes arise, is it really ours? The room was silent for a long moment. Then my chief technology officer spoke. Mr. President, he said, what they are offering is not internet infrastructure. It is digital colonialism with a modern interface. That phrase stuck with me. Digital colonialism. Our grandparents fought against colonial powers that wanted to control our land, our resources, our labor. They won independence through tremendous sacrifice. Now a new form of colonialism was being offered to us, wrapped in the language of development and progress. Instead of controlling our land, they wanted to control our communications. Instead of extracting our minerals, they wanted to extract our data. Instead of colonial governors, they wanted corporate contracts that gave them the same power. The answer was obvious. I drafted a response personally. I did not delegate this to a diplomat or a spokesperson. This message needed to come directly from me. Thank you for your offer. We decline. Burkina Faso will build its own digital infrastructure with partners who respect our sovereignty. I kept it short. I kept it polite, but I made the message clear. We would not trade our independence for convenience, no matter how attractive the offer appeared. His team responded within hours. They improved the offer: lower prices, longer trial period, training programs for our technicians, promises of local job creation. They thought I was negotiating. They thought my refusal was an opening bid in a bargaining process. They did not understand that some things are not for sale at any price. I declined again. This time my response was even shorter. Our position has not changed. We will build our own infrastructure. The third offer came 2 days later. This one was different. They dropped almost all the problematic clauses I had identified. They offered to establish a local office in Ouagadougou. They promised to hire Burkinabe staff. They even suggested a joint venture structure that would give us partial ownership. On paper, it looked like they had addressed all my concerns. But I saw what they were really doing. They were making the cage more comfortable, but it was still a cage. Because the fundamental problem remained. The satellites themselves were not ours. The technology was not ours. The control was not ours. No matter how they restructured the deal, no matter what promises they made, the basic reality would not change. Our digital infrastructure would depend on a system we did not own, operated by a company we did not control, subject to decisions made by people who did not answer to us. I declined the third offer without even presenting it to my team. There was no point in discussing variations of something we had already decided against. They did not understand. This was never about price. This was about principle. You cannot build a nation on infrastructure someone else controls. You cannot claim independence while depending on satellites that answer to foreign governments or foreign corporations. and call yourself sovereign when your communications travel through systems that others can monitor, manipulate, or shut down at will. This is not theoretical, this is not paranoia, this is basic strategic reality that every independent nation must understand. Let me explain why digital sovereignty matters so much, because I think many people do not fully understand what is at stake here. In the old days, sovereignty meant controlling your borders, your military, your natural resources. A nation was considered truly independent if it could defend its territory, feed its people, and make its own decisions without foreign interference. But the world has changed. Today, sovereignty requires something more: control over your digital infrastructure. Why? Because in the modern world, almost everything depends on digital communications. Your banking system runs on digital networks. Your power grid is controlled by digital systems. Your hospitals use digital records. Your government coordinates through digital communications. Your military relies on digital command and control. If someone else controls those networks, they control your country even if they never send a single soldier across your border. They can shut down your banks with a keystroke. They can disrupt your power grid with a cyber attack. They can read your military communications and know your plans before you execute them. They can manipulate your information environment and shape what your citizens see and believe. This is not science fiction. This is happening right now all over the world. We have seen nations brought to their knees, not by armies, but by cyber attacks that crippled their infrastructure. We have seen elections influenced by those who controlled the flow of information on digital platforms, governments paralyzed when their communications were compromised by foreign intelligence agencies, economies damaged when their financial systems were disrupted by those who had access to their digital networks. And in almost every case, the vulnerability came from the same source: dependence on digital infrastructure they did not control. That is why I keep emphasizing this point. That is why I refused Musk's offer even when it seemed generous. That is why I am willing to accept slower, more expensive alternatives if they give us control. Because digital sovereignty is not optional, it is essential. Musk believed his technology was so superior that we had no choice but to accept his terms. He believed African nations would always choose convenience over sovereignty. He was wrong. Yes, Starlink is advanced. I am not denying that. The technology is impressive. The coverage is extensive. The speed is remarkable. It could bring internet to our remote areas quickly. I understand that. I have visited those communities. I know how desperately they need connectivity. And it would be easier than building our own system, much easier. I am not naive about the challenges we face in developing our own alternative. But easier is not the same as better. Easy solutions often come with hidden costs that only become apparent years later, when it is too late to reverse course. Quick fixes often create long-term dependencies that are far more expensive than the upfront investment in building your own capacity. Convenient options often include invisible chains that restrict your freedom in ways you do not notice until you try to move independently. I have seen this pattern before, not just in technology, but in every sector where foreign companies offered African nations help. Foreign companies offer African nations help that looks generous on the surface. Free vaccines with strings attached that give them control over our health policies. Cheap loans with conditions that destroy our economies and force us to sell our assets. Technology deals that give them access to our data, our resources, our secrets. They call it development, they call it partnership, they call it aid. I call it digital colonialism, because that is what it is, the same old colonialism with a new face, using technology instead of military force, offering convenience instead of demanding tribute, but achieving the same result: foreign control over African resources and African sovereignty. Musk's offer was the same trap with a modern interface. Instead of mining our gold, they wanted to mine our data. Instead of controlling our railways, they wanted to control our communications. Instead of colonial governors, they wanted corporate contracts. The answer is no. The answer will always be no. Some people ask me, "But Captain, what is your alternative? How will we bring internet to rural areas without Starlink? How will we compete with Western technology if we reject their most advanced systems?" I will tell you exactly how. We are partnering with China to build fiber optic networks across Burkina Faso. I know what the West will say about this. They will claim we are just trading one form of dependence for another. They will say China is no better than Western companies. They will warn about debt traps and Chinese influence. But let me explain why this partnership is fundamentally different from what Musk was offering. First, The infrastructure we are building with China will be physically located in Burkina Faso. The fiber optic cables will run through our ground. The data centers will be built on our territory. The equipment will be installed and maintained here. This is not satellites floating in space that we cannot access or control. This is physical infrastructure that belongs to us, that we can see, that we can protect, that we can modify if needed. Second, the contracts we have signed with Chinese companies include genuine technology transfer. They are training our engineers not just to use the systems, but to understand how they work, how to maintain them, how to upgrade them, eventually how to build them ourselves. This is not a service we are buying, this is capacity we are building. Third, and this is crucial, the financing structure gives us ownership from day one. Yes, we are borrowing money from Chinese banks to pay for construction, but the infrastructure belongs to us. If we have disputes, they will be settled under our law, in our courts, according to terms we negotiated as equals. This is partnership, not dependence. Could China theoretically use this relationship to gain influence over us? Of course. Any partnership involves some degree of mutual influence. That is the nature of relationships between nations. But there is a fundamental difference between influence that comes from partnership and control that comes from dependency. China is helping us build infrastructure we will own and control. Musk was offering us access to infrastructure he would own and control, and how to maintain and operate these systems ourselves. Musk was offering us a service we would have to keep buying from him forever. China's contracts can be renegotiated or terminated if they do not serve our interests. Musk's satellites cannot be renegotiated, they are in space, beyond our reach, subject only to his decisions. Do you see the difference? One path leads to capacity building and eventual independence. The other path leads to permanent dependence on a foreign corporation. I chose the path that leads to independence, even though it is harder, even though it will take longer, even though it costs more upfront. But the fiber optic network is just one part of our strategy. We are also working with local engineers to develop our own satellite program. Yes, our own satellite program. I know that sounds ambitious. I know many people will laugh at the idea of Burkina Faso launching satellites. But why not? If we have the technical knowledge, if we can partner with countries that have launch capabilities, if we can train our young people in satellite technology, why should we accept permanent dependence on foreign satellites? It will take years, maybe a decade or more, but it is possible. We are starting small. First, we will participate in joint satellite projects with other African nations. We will learn the technology. We will build the expertise. We will train a generation of engineers who understand how satellite communications work. Then, we will move to the next level, designing and building our own satellites, even if we have to partner with others for the actual launch. Eventually, and I may not live to see this day, but I am laying the foundation for it, Burkina Faso will have its own satellite infrastructure controlled by us, serving our needs, subject to our laws. That is the vision. That is what I am working toward. That is why I said no to Musk. Because I would rather spend 20 years building our own capacity than spend 20 years renting capacity from someone who can shut us down whenever they want. We are also training our youth in telecommunications technology so we can maintain our own systems. This might be the most important part of our strategy, because infrastructure is useless if you do not have people who know how to operate it, maintain it, upgrade it, and eventually improve upon it. We have established new programs in our universities focused specifically on telecommunications engineering, satellite technology, cybersecurity, and digital infrastructure management. We are sending our brightest students abroad to China, to India, to Russia, to any country that will help us build this capacity to learn advanced technical skills and bring that knowledge back home. We are creating apprenticeship programs where young Burkinabe engineers work alongside experienced foreign technicians on our infrastructure projects, learning by doing, building practical skills that cannot be taught in classrooms alone. This is a long-term investment in human capital. It will not show immediate results. It will not make headlines. It will not impress people who measure progress in quarterly reports. But 20 years from now, Burkina Faso will have a generation of engineers who can build, maintain, and innovate in telecommunications technology. We will not need to import foreign experts to manage our systems. We will not need to send our sensitive equipment abroad for repairs. We will not need to depend on foreign companies to upgrade our networks. We will have built genuine technological capacity, not just purchased access to someone else's technology. It will take longer than accepting Musk's offer. It will cost more upfront than accepting free or discounted service. It will require patience and investment that some people will question. But when it is finished, it will be ours. Our internet, our infrastructure, our control, our capacity, our future. No foreign company can shut it down when we make decisions they dislike. No foreign government can access our data without our permission. No foreign court can override our laws. No foreign corporation can hold our communications hostage to their business interests. That is worth the wait. That is worth the cost. That is worth every sacrifice we make along the way. Musk did not expect this response. He thought African leaders would jump at any offer from a billionaire. He thought we would be grateful for whatever scraps of technology he threw our way. He thought wrong. But I want to be fair to Musk for a moment. I do not think he is uniquely evil or uniquely exploitative. I do not think he woke up one morning and decided to colonize Africa through satellite internet. I think he is doing what successful businessmen do, building a global network, expanding his market, maximizing his profits, and securing his company's future. The problem is not Musk personally. The problem is the system that allows corporations to become so powerful that they can offer nations infrastructure deals that look like aid but function like control. The global economic structure that makes it easier for African nations to rent technology from foreign corporations than to build their own capacity. An international order that treats sovereignty as negotiable, as something nations can trade away in exchange for convenience or development. That is what I am pushing back against, not Musk specifically, but the entire system that his offer represents. And that is why my decision resonated far beyond Burkina Faso. I am not that kind of leader. I did not become captain to make easy choices. I did not take responsibility for this nation to preside over its continued dependence on foreign powers and foreign corporations. I do not measure progress by how quickly we adopt Western technology. I measure it by how much control we have over our own future, how much capacity we build in our own people, how much sovereignty we maintain over our own resources and infrastructure. Starlink might be faster than what we are building. It might be more advanced. It might be more convenient. But it is not ours. And I would rather have slower internet that we control than fast internet that controls us. I would rather have less advanced technology that we own than cutting-edge technology that we rent from those who can shut it down at will. And invest in building our own capacity, even if it takes decades, than accept permanent dependence on foreign systems, no matter how impressive they are. This decision sent a message that resonated across Africa. Other nations started questioning their own deals with foreign tech companies. Other leaders started asking, who really benefits from this arrangement? Are we building capacity or just buying access? Are we developing sovereignty or just accepting a more modern form of dependence? That is why Musk was stunned, not because I said no, plenty of people say no to business offers, but because I showed other African nations that saying no is possible, that we have alternatives, that we do not have to accept the terms we are offered just because they come from powerful corporations or wealthy individuals. For decades, we were told we had no choice. We were told we must accept whatever terms the West offered because we had no alternatives, no capacity to build our own solutions, no partners who would treat us differently. That was a lie designed to keep us dependent. We have alternatives. We have partners who respect us not because they are more moral than Western companies, but because they are willing to engage with us on terms that build our capacity rather than perpetuate our dependence. We have the ability to build our own solutions. It takes longer. It costs more. It requires patience and investment and sacrifice, but it is possible. And once one nation demonstrates that it is possible, other nations start to believe they can do it too. That is what terrifies the Musks of the world. The tech billionaires who have built global empires on the assumption that developing nations will always choose convenience over sovereignty. They are terrified that African nations might start making different choices, that we might start building our own capacity, that we might start demanding genuine partnerships instead of accepting disguised dependence. They are terrified that their business model rent us technology we can never truly own, lock us into systems we can never truly control, maintain permanent dependence that generates permanent profits might not work anymore. It takes courage to choose the harder path. It takes vision to invest in long-term independence instead of short-term convenience. But that is what leadership requires. Real leadership is not about making popular decisions. It is not about taking the easy path. It is not about accepting what is offered just because refusing it might be difficult. Real leadership is about making choices that protect your people's long-term interests, even when those choices are unpopular, even when they are difficult, even when they require sacrifice. I became captain not to win popularity contests. I became captain to make choices that protect our people's future, even when those choices are difficult, even when they are criticized, even when they require us to reject offers that look generous on the surface. This is one of those choices. Saying no to Musk was not easy. It would have been much easier to accept his offer, to enjoy the immediate benefits of Starlink connectivity, to be praised for bringing modern technology to Burkina Faso quickly and efficiently. But easy choices often lead to hard consequences, and I would rather make hard choices now that lead to better outcomes later than make easy choices now that create problems we cannot solve later. Let me take a moment to explain exactly what I mean by digital colonialism, because I think this concept is crucial to understanding why I made this decision and why other African nations should think carefully before accepting similar offers. Traditional colonialism was relatively easy to identify. Foreign powers sent soldiers to occupy our lands. They established colonial administrations to govern us. They extracted our resources and shipped them back to their home countries. They imposed their laws, their languages, their systems on us. We could see the colonizers, we could identify the colonial structures, we knew exactly who was exploiting us and how. Digital colonialism is more subtle. There are no soldiers, no colonial governors, no explicit occupation. Instead, there are contracts, service agreements, terms of use. Instead of military force, there is economic pressure and technological superiority. Instead of extracting minerals, they extract data. Instead of controlling our governments directly, they control the infrastructure our governments depend on. But the result is the same: foreign control over our resources, our decision-making, our future. Let me give you some examples of how this works in practice. When a nation accepts a free or discounted digital service from a foreign corporation, they are not just getting internet access or cloud storage or satellite communications. They are integrating that foreign system into their critical infrastructure. Their government emails start flowing through foreign servers. Their financial transactions start depending on foreign networks. Their communications start relying on foreign satellites. At first, this seems fine. The service works well. It is convenient. It is cheaper than building their own alternative. But then, slowly, the dependence deepens. More and more systems get connected to the foreign infrastructure. More and more critical functions start depending on it. More and more people get trained to use it, making it harder to switch to alternatives. And then, when the nation is thoroughly dependent, the terms start to change. The free service becomes paid, the prices increase, the contract terms become less favorable, the foreign corporation starts demanding more access, more data, more control. And what can the nation do? They are already dependent. Switching to an alternative would cause massive disruption. Building their own system would take years and cost far more than they budgeted. So they accept the new terms. They pay the higher prices. They grant the additional access. And the foreign corporation's control deepens further. This is not hypothetical. This is the pattern we have seen repeated in nation after nation, sector after sector. We have seen it with social media platforms that became essential to political communication, then started censoring content based on their own policies rather than local laws. We have seen it with cloud services that became essential to government operations, then demanded access to data that should have remained confidential. We have seen it with payment systems that became essential to commerce, then started blocking transactions that violated their terms of service rather than local regulations. We have seen it with search engines that became essential to information access, then started manipulating results to favor certain viewpoints or certain commercial interests. In every case, the pattern is the same: offer something valuable for free or cheap, wait for dependence to develop, then leverage that dependence to extract more value or more control. This is digital colonialism, and it is happening right now, all over the developing world, including in Africa. Musk's Starlink offer followed this exact pattern. Offer us satellite internet at attractive terms. Wait for our government and our people to become dependent on it. Then, once we cannot easily switch to alternatives, change the terms in ways that give his company more control and more profit. I saw this pattern clearly when I read those contract clauses. That is why I said no, even when the offer looked generous. Because I have studied history. I know how colonialism works. I know that it always starts with offers that seem beneficial, with promises of development and progress, with assurances that the foreign power only wants to help. And I know that it always ends with exploitation, with dependence, with loss of sovereignty. I will not let that happen to Burkina Faso, not on my watch. Some people will say I am being paranoid. Some will say I am seeing colonialism where there is only commerce. Some will say I am rejecting genuine help because of historical grievances that are no longer relevant. But I ask those people, if this is just normal commerce, why are the contract terms so one-sided? If this is genuine help, why does it come with clauses that give the foreign corporation access to all our data? If this is just business, why can the service be terminated at any time without explanation? Normal commerce involves mutual benefit and balanced terms. Genuine help does not come with strings that restrict your sovereignty. Legitimate business does not require you to give up control over your most critical infrastructure. What Musk was offering was not normal commerce. It was digital colonialism dressed up in the language of development and innovation. And I will not accept it, no matter how attractive the packaging. Now, I want to be honest about something that many leaders are afraid to admit. Choosing independence is expensive. Building our own infrastructure will cost billions of dollars that we do not have. Training our own engineers will take decades of investment in education. Developing our own technology will require research and development budgets that strain our limited resources. If we had accepted Musk's offer, we could have had satellite internet immediately, at little or no upfront cost. Our remote villages could have been connected within months. Our government could have been using advanced communication systems within weeks. Instead, we are embarking on a path that will take years, maybe decades, to achieve the same level of connectivity. We are spending money we desperately need for other priorities: healthcare, education, agriculture, security. We are asking our people to be patient, to accept slower progress, to sacrifice immediate benefits for long-term independence. This is hard. This is painful. This is the cost of independence. But here is what I want everyone to understand. The cost of dependence is even higher. When you depend on infrastructure you do not control, you pay not just in money, but in sovereignty. You pay in the loss of privacy when all your communications flow through foreign systems. You pay in vulnerability when those who control your infrastructure can shut it down at will. You pay in lost opportunities when you cannot make decisions that might displease those who provide your essential services. These costs are harder to measure than the upfront price of building your own infrastructure. They do not appear in budget spreadsheets. They do not show up in quarterly reports. But they are real. And they are permanent, as long as the dependence continues. I would rather pay the high upfront cost of independence than pay the ongoing cost of dependence forever. Let me give you a concrete example of what I mean. Right now, we are negotiating with several countries about military cooperation and security arrangements. These are sensitive discussions that involve classified information about our defense capabilities, our security threats, our strategic priorities. If we were using Starlink for our government communications, all of those discussions would be flowing through Musk's satellites. And remember Clause 7, all data can be accessed by the parent company for security purposes. That means Musk's company, and by extension, the United States government, which can compel American companies to share information, would have access to our most sensitive military and security communications. How could we negotiate freely? How could we make independent decisions about our security? How could we maintain any secrets when everything we discuss is potentially visible to foreign corporations and foreign governments? This is the cost of dependence. It is not measured in dollars. It is measured in lost sovereignty, in compromised security, in the inability to make truly independent decisions. Or consider another example: economic policy. Suppose we want to implement policies that favor local businesses over foreign corporations. Suppose we want to regulate foreign companies more strictly to protect our workers or our environment. Suppose we want to make decisions that might reduce foreign profits but benefit our people. If we depend on foreign infrastructure that can be shut down at any time without explanation, how free are we to make those decisions? What if we implement a policy that displeases the corporations we depend on, and suddenly our communications go dark? What if we regulate foreign businesses more strictly, and suddenly the services we have built our economy around are terminated? This is the leverage that dependence creates. It may never be used explicitly. The corporations may never directly threaten to shut down our services if we do not comply with their preferences. But the threat is always there, implicit in the relationship, and it shapes our decision-making even when no one says anything explicitly. We start asking ourselves, can we afford to make this decision? What if it angers the corporations we depend on? What if they retaliate by cutting off our services? And slowly, without anyone forcing us directly, we start making decisions that prioritize the interests of foreign corporations over the interests of our own people. This is how dependence works. This is why it is so dangerous. This is why I am willing to pay the high cost of independence rather than accept the ongoing cost of dependence. But I also want to be clear. I am not asking our people to suffer unnecessarily. I am not pursuing independence for its own sake, regardless of the cost to our citizens. We are taking practical steps to minimize the hardship while we build our own capacity, prioritizing connectivity for essential services, hospitals, schools, government offices, so that the most critical needs are met even as we build the broader infrastructure, partnering with neighboring countries to share resources and reduce costs. If we can build regional infrastructure together, we can achieve connectivity faster and cheaper than if each nation tries to build everything alone. And seeking financing on favorable terms, long-term loans with low interest rates, grants from partners who support our independence, investment from countries that benefit from a more self-sufficient Africa. We are being smart about this. We are not blindly pursuing independence at any cost. We are pursuing independence in a way that is sustainable, that serves our people's needs, that builds toward a better future. But I will not compromise on the fundamental principle. We will build infrastructure we control, even if it costs more and takes longer than accepting what foreign corporations offer us. Body Part 8, the ripple effect across Africa, 110 to 0 to 125 to 0. This decision sent a message that resonated across Africa. Within weeks of our announcement, I started receiving calls from other African leaders asking about our alternative plans, about our partnerships with China, about how we were financing our infrastructure development. Some were cautious, testing the waters, wondering if saying no to Western tech companies was really possible. Others were enthusiastic, excited by the example we had set, eager to follow a similar path. Other nations started questioning their own deals with foreign tech companies. Governments that had already signed contracts with Starlink started reviewing those contracts more carefully, looking for the same problematic clauses I had found. Other leaders started asking, who really benefits from this arrangement? Are we building capacity or just buying access? Are we developing sovereignty or just accepting a more modern form of dependence? These are exactly the questions that need to be asked. These are the conversations that should have happened before nations signed away control over their digital infrastructure. Better late than never. I have had confidential discussions with leaders from at least 8 other African nations who are now reconsidering their relationships with foreign tech companies. Some are looking at ways to renegotiate existing contracts. Others are planning to build their own alternatives, similar to what we are doing. This is the ripple effect I hoped for when I made this decision public. Because one nation standing alone against the pressure to accept digital dependence is vulnerable. We can be isolated, sanctioned, pressured until we give in. But if multiple nations start making the same choice, if a movement begins across Africa toward genuine digital sovereignty, that is much harder to stop. That is why Musk was stunned, not just because I said no, but because I showed other African nations that saying no is possible. For decades, we were told we had no choice. We were told we must accept whatever terms the West offered because we had no alternatives, no capacity to build our own solutions, no partners who would treat us differently. That was a lie designed to keep us dependent. We have alternatives. We have partners who respect us not because they are more moral than Western companies, but because they are willing to engage with us on terms that build our capacity rather than perpetuate our dependence. China is helping multiple African nations build fiber optic networks, train engineers, develop telecommunications capacity, not out of charity, but because they see benefit in having strong, capable partners rather than dependent clients. India is sharing satellite technology and training programs with African nations. Russia is offering cybersecurity cooperation. Even some European countries, recognizing that the old model is failing, are starting to offer more balanced partnerships. We have the ability to build our own solutions. It takes longer. It costs more. It requires patience and investment and sacrifice. But it is possible. And once one nation demonstrates that it is possible, other nations start to believe they can do it too. That is what is happening now across Africa. Leaders are realizing that they have options. They are recognizing that the choice is not between accepting Western terms or having no technology at all. The choice is between building their own capacity or remaining permanently dependent. More and more are choosing to build their own capacity. This terrifies the tech billionaires who have built global empires on the assumption that developing nations will always choose convenience over sovereignty. They are terrified that African nations might start making different choices, that we might start building our own capacity, that we might start demanding genuine partnerships instead of accepting disguised dependence. They are terrified that their business model rent us technology we can never truly own, lock us into systems we can never truly control, maintain permanent dependence that generates permanent profits might not work anymore. Good, let them be terrified. Because their terror means we are succeeding, their panic means we are threatening their control, their desperate attempts to improve their offers mean we have leverage we did not have before. This is how change happens, not through polite requests that those in power treat us more fairly, not through hoping that corporations will voluntarily give up their advantages, but through demonstrating that we have alternatives, that we can build our own capacity, that we do not need them as much as they need us. Every African nation that says no to digital dependence makes it easier for the next nation to say no. Every nation that builds its own infrastructure proves that it can be done. Every nation that trains its own engineers adds to our collective capacity. We are building momentum. We are creating a movement. We are demonstrating that African technological independence is not just a dream, but an achievable reality. And that changes everything. Now, I want to address some of the criticisms that have been leveled against this decision, because I think it is important to engage honestly with the concerns people have raised. The most common criticism is, you are rejecting Western technology while accepting Chinese technology. Isn't that just trading one form of dependence for another? This is a fair question, and it deserves a serious answer. The key difference is not who we are partnering with, but the terms of the partnership. When we partner with Chinese companies to build fiber optic networks, we own the infrastructure. It is physically located in Burkina Faso. It is subject to our laws. It cannot be shut down remotely by a foreign corporation or foreign government. When Musk offered us Starlink, we would have been renting access to infrastructure located in space, owned by his company, subject to American law, capable of being shut down at any time without explanation. Do you see the difference? One involves building capacity we own. The other involves renting access we can never own. Furthermore, the Chinese contracts include genuine technology transfer. They are training our engineers to build, maintain, and eventually design these systems themselves. The goal is to develop our own capacity, not to create permanent dependence on Chinese expertise. Could China theoretically use this relationship to gain influence over us? Of course, any partnership involves some degree of mutual influence. But there is a fundamental difference between influence that comes from partnership and control that comes from dependency. China cannot shut down infrastructure that we own and that is physically located in our country. Musk could shut down satellites that he owns and that are located in space beyond our reach. China cannot access our communications without our permission because the data flows through systems we control. Musk's contract explicitly gave his company the right to access all data for security purposes. China's contracts can be renegotiated or terminated if they do not serve our interests. Musk's satellites cannot be renegotiated. They are in space, subject only to his decisions. This is not about trusting China more than America. This is about choosing partnerships that build our capacity over services that perpetuate our dependence. Another common criticism is, you are sacrificing your people's immediate needs for abstract principles about sovereignty. Rural villages need internet now, not in 10 years when you finish building your own infrastructure. This criticism is more difficult to address because it contains some truth. Yes, our approach will take longer. Yes, people who need connectivity now will have to wait. But I ask those critics, what is the alternative? If we accept infrastructure we do not control, we may get connectivity faster, but we will be vulnerable forever. We will never truly own our digital infrastructure. We will always be subject to decisions made by foreign corporations or foreign governments. Is that really better for our people in the long run? I would argue that teaching people to be patient while we build our own capacity is better than teaching them to be dependent on foreign systems they can never control. I would argue that investing in building our own infrastructure, even if it takes longer, is better than renting access that we will have to keep paying for forever. I would argue that the temporary sacrifice of slower connectivity is worth the permanent benefit of digital sovereignty. But I also want to emphasize, we are not asking people to suffer unnecessarily. We are prioritizing essential services. We are seeking ways to provide basic connectivity while we build the more advanced infrastructure. We are being strategic about how we roll out our alternative systems. This is not about ideology over people's needs. This is about choosing a path that serves people's long-term interests rather than just their immediate convenience. A third criticism I have heard is, you are isolating Burkina Faso from the global technology ecosystem. You are cutting yourself off from innovation and progress. This fundamentally misunderstands what we are doing. We are not rejecting all foreign technology. We are not trying to build everything ourselves in isolation. We are not cutting ourselves off from global innovation. We are simply insisting on partnerships that respect our sovereignty and build our capacity, rather than accepting services that perpetuate our dependence. We will continue to engage with global technology companies on our terms, not theirs. We will continue to adopt innovations from around the world when they serve our interests, not just the interests of foreign corporations. We will continue to participate in the global digital economy as partners and owners, not as dependent clients. The difference is that we are being strategic about how we engage. We are asking hard questions about who benefits from each arrangement. We are insisting on terms that build our capacity rather than just giving us access to someone else's capacity. This is not isolation. This is strategic engagement. This is smart sovereignty. Finally, some critics have suggested that I am being unrealistic, that small countries like Burkina Faso cannot possibly build advanced technological infrastructure, that we should accept our limitations and work within them rather than pursuing unrealistic ambitions. To those critics I say, you are repeating the same arguments that were used to justify colonialism. They told us we could not govern ourselves. They told us we needed European administrators because we lacked the capacity for self-government. They told us we could not manage our own economies. They told us we needed foreign corporations to develop our resources because we lacked the expertise. We could not build our own industries, and we should stick to exporting raw materials and importing finished goods because we lacked the technology. Every single one of those arguments was wrong. Every single one was designed to justify continued foreign control. Every single one was proven false when we actually tried to build our own capacity. The same is true now with digital infrastructure. They are telling us we cannot build our own systems, that we should accept permanent dependence on foreign technology, that we should know our place and not aspire to true technological sovereignty. They are wrong, just as they were wrong about everything else. We can build our own digital infrastructure. It will be hard. It will take time. It will require resources we barely have. But it is possible, and we will do it. Because the alternative permanent dependence, permanent vulnerability, permanent subordination is unacceptable. It takes courage to choose the harder path. It takes vision to invest in long-term independence instead of short-term convenience. But that is what leadership requires. Real leadership is not about making popular decisions. It is not about taking the easy path. It is not about accepting what is offered just because refusing it might be difficult. Real leadership is about making choices that protect your people's long-term interests, even when those choices are unpopular, even when they are difficult, even when they require sacrifice. I became captain not to win popularity contests. I became captain to make choices that protect our people's future, even when those choices are difficult, even when they are criticized, even when they require us to reject offers that look generous on the surface. This is one of those choices. Saying no to Musk was not easy. It would have been much easier to accept his offer, to enjoy the immediate benefits of Starlink connectivity, to be praised for bringing modern technology to Burkina Faso quickly and efficiently. But I did not become a leader to make easy choices. I became a leader to make right choices, even when they are hard. And the right choice was clear. We will not trade our sovereignty for convenience, no matter how attractive the offer appears. We will build our own digital infrastructure, on our own terms, with partners who respect our sovereignty and help us build our capacity. It will take longer. It will cost more. It will require patience and sacrifice. But when it is finished, it will be ours. Our internet, our infrastructure, our control, our capacity, our future. Elon Musk sent me an offer thinking I would be impressed by his wealth and technology. I sent him back a lesson. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Not our internet, not our data, not our sovereignty. We will build our own digital future on our own terms with partners who treat us as equals, not customers. Some will call this decision foolish. Some will say we are rejecting progress. But I know the truth. Real progress means building systems we control, not depending on systems that control us. I chose independence over convenience, and I would make that choice again every single time. Let this be clear to every tech billionaire, every foreign corporation, every Western government watching. Burkina Faso will not trade our sovereignty for your technology. We will build our own path, even if it is harder, control our own future, even if it takes longer. Remain independent, no matter what you offer. That is what I told Elon Musk and stunned him. We will build our own path, even if it is harder. We will control our own future, even if it takes longer. We will remain independent, no matter what you offer. That is what I told Elon Musk, and that is what stunned him. But let me tell you exactly why those words carried so much weight, why they resonated not just with Musk, but with leaders across Africa and around the world. Why they represent more than just a rejection of one business deal, but a fundamental shift in how African nations engage with global technology powers. When I said we will build our own path, even if it is harder, I was not speaking from ignorance about how hard that path truly is. I know exactly what we are facing. I have studied the technical challenges. I have reviewed the financial projections. I have consulted with engineers who explained in painful detail how difficult it will be to build fiber optic networks across our entire country, how many years it will take to train enough telecommunications experts, how much money we will need to invest before we see any return. I know that building our own infrastructure means accepting slower progress than we could have with Starlink. I know it means our rural villages will wait years longer for connectivity. I know it means our government will operate with less advanced communication systems in the short term. I know it means our businesses will face disadvantages competing with companies in other countries that have better digital infrastructure. I know all of this, and I chose this path anyway. Because I also know what the alternative means. I know that accepting Musk's offer would have given us faster connectivity at the cost of permanent dependence. I know that choosing the easier path would have locked us into a system we could never escape, a relationship we could never renegotiate on equal terms, a vulnerability we could never eliminate. The hard path leads to independence, the easy path leads to permanent subordination. When you understand that choice clearly, the decision becomes obvious, even if the execution is difficult. Musk was stunned because he has spent his career convincing people to take the easy path. His entire business model depends on nations and organizations choosing convenience over control, choosing speed over sovereignty, choosing his technology over their own capacity. He has been remarkably successful at this. Starlink operates in dozens of countries. Millions of people use his satellites every day. Governments around the world have signed contracts giving him access to their communications infrastructure. And then he met an African leader who said no, not because we could not afford his service, not because we did not understand his technology, but because we understood too well what accepting his offer would mean for our sovereignty. That is what stunned him. The realization that his technology, his wealth, his reputation were not enough to overcome a principled commitment to independence. When I said we will control our own future, even if it takes longer, I was making a statement about time horizons that most modern leaders have forgotten how to think about. We live in an era of quarterly earnings reports, election cycles measured in years, and technology products that become obsolete in months. Everyone is focused on short-term results, immediate gains, quick wins that can be celebrated before attention moves elsewhere. But building a nation requires a different time horizon. It requires thinking in decades, in generations, in centuries. It requires making investments today that will not pay off until long after current leaders have left office. It requires accepting short-term costs for long-term benefits that may not be visible until your grandchildren are adults. This is the time horizon I am working with. I am not building digital infrastructure for the next election cycle. I am building it for the next century. I am not making decisions based on what will make me popular today. I am making decisions based on what will make Burkina Faso strong 50 years from now. From that perspective, the choice is clear. Taking longer to build infrastructure we control is obviously better than getting quick access to infrastructure we can never own. But this kind of thinking is rare in modern leadership. Most leaders are under constant pressure to show immediate results, to deliver quick wins, to demonstrate progress within their term of office. They do not have the luxury or the courage to make investments that will not pay off until long after they are gone. That is why Musk was stunned. He is accustomed to dealing with leaders who think in quarters and years. He met a leader who thinks in decades and generations. His offer was designed to appeal to short-term thinking. Accept our service now. Get connectivity immediately. Worry about the long-term implications later. That pitch works on leaders who need to show results quickly. It does not work on leaders who are willing to accept slower progress in exchange for permanent independence. When I said, "We will remain independent no matter what you offer," I was drawing a line that cannot be crossed at any price. This is crucial for Musk and other tech billionaires to understand. African sovereignty is not for sale, not at any price, not under any terms, not even when the offer looks incredibly generous. Musk tried 3 times to improve his offer. Each time, he addressed some of the concerns I had raised. Each time, he made the terms more favorable. Each time, he added more benefits, more training programs, more local investment. And each time, I said no. Because he was trying to negotiate something that is not negotiable. He was trying to put a price on something that has no price. He was trying to buy something that cannot be bought. Independence is not a commodity. Sovereignty is not a product. Control over our own future is not something we will trade for technology, no matter how advanced, or money, no matter how much, or convenience, no matter how attractive. This is the line African nations must learn to draw. This is the principle we must be willing to defend at any cost. This is the standard we must maintain no matter what offers come our way. Musk was stunned because he has built his fortune on the assumption that everything has a price, that every nation, every organization, every individual will eventually accept the right offer if you make it attractive enough. He learned that assumption is wrong. Some things cannot be bought, some principles cannot be compromised, some decisions cannot be changed, no matter what incentives are offered. That is what I told Elon Musk, and that is what stunned him. But the impact of those words extends far beyond one rejected business deal. Those words have become a rallying cry for African leaders who are tired of accepting terms dictated by foreign powers. Those words have inspired other nations to reconsider their own relationships with tech giants. Those words have demonstrated that saying no is possible, even when the pressure to say yes is enormous. In the weeks after I publicly explained my decision, I received messages from leaders across Africa. Some were words of support and encouragement. Others were questions about how we plan to build our alternative infrastructure. Still others were confessions that they wished they had made similar choices before signing their own contracts with foreign tech companies. One leader told me privately, "I wish I had your courage. We signed with Starlink 2 years ago, and now we are discovering all the problems you identified. But we are so dependent on their service that we cannot easily switch to an alternative. We are trapped." That conversation broke my heart, because that leader is intelligent, capable, and genuinely committed to their nation's interests. They simply made a decision before fully understanding the implications. They chose convenience before recognizing the cost. They accepted an offer that seemed generous before reading the fine print carefully enough. And now, they are trapped in exactly the kind of dependent relationship I refuse to accept. That is why I am speaking so publicly about this decision, not to criticize other leaders who made different choices, not to claim moral superiority over those who accepted offers I rejected, but to warn other African nations about the trap before they fall into it, to show that alternatives exist, to demonstrate that independence is possible if you are willing to pay the price. The words, "We will build our own path, even if it is harder," are not just a statement about Burkina Faso's choice. They are an invitation to other African nations to join us on that path. They are a declaration that we do not have to accept the terms we are offered. They are a reminder that difficulty is not the same as impossibility. Yes, building our own infrastructure is harder than accepting Starlink. But hard does not mean impossible. Hard does not mean not worth doing. Hard does not mean we should give up and accept dependence instead. Our ancestors faced much harder challenges when they fought for independence from colonial rule. They faced military occupation, economic exploitation, political oppression. They fought against empires that had vastly superior resources, technology, and power. And they won, not because it was easy, not because the path was clear, but because they understood that independence was worth any sacrifice, any hardship, any cost. We face a different kind of challenge today, not military occupation but digital dependence, not political colonialism but technological control, not explicit empire but corporate power that functions like empire in practice. But the principle is the same. Independence is worth fighting for, even when the fight is hard. Sovereignty is worth defending, even when defense is costly. Control over our own future is worth pursuing, even when the pursuit is difficult. That is what our ancestors taught us. That is what I am trying to honor with this decision. That is what I hope other African leaders will remember when they face similar choices. The words, "We will control our own future, even if it takes longer," are a rejection of the impatience that modern technology culture tries to impose on us. We are told that everything must happen immediately, that waiting is unacceptable, that any delay is a failure. But building something that lasts requires patience. Creating something of value requires time. Developing genuine capacity requires years of investment before you see results. I am willing to wait. I am willing to accept that our digital infrastructure will develop more slowly than it would if we accepted foreign services. I am willing to tell our people that connectivity will come, but it will come on our timeline, not on a timeline dictated by foreign corporations. This patience is not weakness. It is strength. It is the strength to resist pressure for immediate results. It is the strength to invest in long-term benefits even when short-term costs are high. It is the strength to build something permanent rather than rent something temporary. Musk was stunned because patience is rare in his world. Silicon Valley culture is built on speed, on disruption, on moving fast and breaking things. The idea of deliberately choosing a slower path, of accepting that something will take decades to build, of valuing permanence over speed, these concepts are foreign to that culture. But they are not foreign to African culture. We understand that some things cannot be rushed. We understand that building something that will last requires time and patience. We understand that the best results come not from the fastest path, but from the most careful path. That is the wisdom I am drawing on when I say we will control our own future, even if it takes longer. That is the cultural knowledge that makes me confident this decision is right, even when others question it. The words, "we will remain independent no matter what you offer," are the core principle that cannot be compromised under any circumstances. This is the line in the sand. This is the boundary that cannot be crossed. This is the standard that must be maintained regardless of pressure, regardless of incentives, regardless of consequences. Independence is not negotiable. Sovereignty is not for sale. Control over our future is not something we will trade away no matter what we are offered in exchange. Musk tried to find a price. He tried to structure an offer attractive enough that we would compromise this principle. He tried to make the terms so favorable that saying no would seem irrational. He failed. Not because his offers were not attractive. They were. But because some things are more valuable than any offer, no matter how attractive. This is the lesson I hope resonates across Africa and across the developing world. Know what is not for sale. Know what principles cannot be compromised. Know what lines cannot be crossed. Then defend those lines absolutely. Do not negotiate them. Do not compromise them. Do not accept that everything has a price. Independence has no price. Sovereignty has no price. Control over your future has no price. Once you accept that principle, once you internalize that truth, once you commit to defending it absolutely, then decisions like rejecting Musk's offer become simple, even when they are difficult. That is what I told Elon Musk, and that is what stunned him. But more importantly, that is what I told Africa. That is what I told every nation that has been pressured to accept terms that compromise their sovereignty. That is what I told every leader who has been told they have no choice but to accept what foreign powers offer them. You do have a choice. You can say no. You can build your own path. You can control your own future. You can remain independent. It will be hard. It will take time. It will require sacrifice. But it is possible. And it is worth it. That is the message that stunned Musk and resonated across Africa. That is the message I will continue to repeat until every African nation understands that independence is possible if we have the courage to choose it. That is the message that will guide Burkina Faso as we build our own digital infrastructure, train our own engineers, develop our own capacity. We will build our own path, even if it is harder. That is not just what I told Musk, that is what I am telling the world. And that is what will protect our sovereignty for generations to come.